Thank you, Mr Speaker. Tonight I rise to remind the House that the claim of right for Scotland is a principle which recognises that the people of Scotland have the sovereign right to determine the form of government best suited to their needs. This is a right well established and was first set out in the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320 and most recently endorsed by the House in the Commons in July 2018, a debate which I was privileged and proud in which to speak. In Scotland, this House is not recognised as sovereign. The people of Scotland are sovereign, and they are angry that this House, this government, is overreaching itself by trampling all over Scotland's devolution settlement, with repeated and concerted attempts by the Tory benches opposite to shout down members of these benches when we dare to speak up on behalf of Scotland. The debate tonight comes at an extremely critical time for Scotland, with the UK on the cusp of withdrawing from the European Union, something which the people of Scotland rejected by a significant majority, but is to be imposed upon them against their expressed democratic wish. However, if you accept the European Union referendum result in England, despite all the cheating and law-breaking that we know went on, if you accept that result, because the democratic will of the people of Scotland is different from the democratic will of the people of England, then too bad. Scotland is to be ignored, dismissed and dragged out of the European Union anyway. And with the Westminster power grab and the lack of consent given to this disastrous Brexit by the Scottish Parliament, the devolution settlement has been trampled underfoot by this government. So much for a so-called union of equals. So much for Scotland leading the UK, not leaving the UK. How can this be a union of equals when the democratically devolved legislatures in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have all refused to consent to this Tory government's withdrawal agreement that will damage our jobs, it will damage our prosperity and our relationships with our European partners. This Brexit, which may yet deliver a no-deal scenario, is to be forced on Scotland against her will, exposing for all to see the myth of the so-called union of equals. In the general election a few weeks ago, the Tories in Scotland unequivocally urged voters in Scotland to vote Tory to stop Indy Ref 2. We in the SNP stood firmly and proudly on a platform of saying no to Brexit and saying yes to the people of Scotland's right to choose their own future. And Scotland, by and large, I'll just finish this point. Scotland, by and large, did not vote Tory, but voted SNP in huge numbers. The SNP won 80% of the seats in Scotland, and yet this government still refuses to accept that the people of Scotland have made their choice. They want Scotland to have the right to choose its own future, because no one is better placed to make decisions for Scotland than the people who live in Scotland. Now,
I hear what the honourable lady is saying, but in the week of the general election in my constituency and other constituencies, SNP candidates told voters that this election wasn't anything to do with independence. They were to vote SNP if they were against Brexit or if they were against Boris, but it had nothing to do with independence. But yet at 10 o'clock on the 12th of December, it was all to do with independence.
This is the kind of willful fingers and ears that we have come to expect. Not everybody in Scotland who voted SNP is yet persuaded of the arguments for independence. But what they do want, Mr Speaker, is the right to choose. Now we know,
that's what we stood on.
We know that the Minister will say, he will trot out well-worn phrases, the lily-livered lines about the SNP not winning over 50% of the popular vote in the election in 2019. However, he must consider that the first-past-the-post voting system, which he supports, is the one in which we are working. And further to this, The SNP in Scotland has won the council elections in 2016, the Holyrood elections in 2016, the general election in 2017, the European elections in 2019 and the general election in 2019. And each of these 5 elections were contested on one proposition by the Tories opposite, and that was vote Tory to stop Indie Ref 2. The Tories in Scotland, Mr Speaker, the Tories in Scotland never mentioned any policies, they never discussed any other issues, they simply said vote Tory to stop Indie Ref 2. And yet still, Mr Speaker, they could not get close to beating the SNP in these elections. For anyone to deny the democratic right of Scotland to have a say over her own future path, to try to shift the goalposts on what winning an election actually means or what winning an election actually looks like is deluded. Doing an impersonation of King Canute, trying to hold back the tide, simply shows the desperation and arrogance of this government, who thinks that if it can just ignore the pesky Scots for long enough, they will just give up. We will not give up. We in Scotland have a right. We have a right which we claim in no uncertain terms to choose our own future, and we will not be denied. And if I'll let Mr. Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, can I commend the Honourable Lady for her hard work on behalf of her constituents and how much it means for her to come back to this House. I have spoken to her beforehand and she understands what I'm going to say right now to her. Does the Honourable Lady accept, while many people have voted for her because of who she is and her hard work, and for the party members and colleagues here as well, that many people who vote Scots, let's say a certain proportion of them, do not accept for independence? Does she accept that?
What I accept is the people who voted for the Scottish National Party want to have the debate and they want to have the choice, and that matters. It's our job to persuade them over the line.
So the honourable gentleman for Strangford, who comes into this with a degree of interest in it, will not be aware that there are 3 Scottish Tory members sitting from Murray, from Dumfriesshire, Crystal and Tweeddale, and from Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkshire. Can the honourable lady say whether the majority has been up or down on the basis of their message to say no to Indie Ref 2?
Well, the honourable member for Glasgow East will know that I do not wish to intrude on private grief, but I have noticed, but I cannot help noticing, Mr Speaker, that each of the 3 Tory MPs from Scotland, each of them have rushed as though their behinds were on fire to leave the Holyrood and Scotland's Parliament to come to this House. And I have to question why that might be. And if not winning over 50% of the popular vote is the only tool in the government's arsenal to deny the people of Scotland the right to choose their own future, then where is the democratic mandate for this government to press ahead with its version of a damaging Brexit? A Brexit born out of a very narrow referendum result, with the Electoral Commission itself saying that that referendum was characterised by law-breaking, cheating and dishonesty. In last year's general election, the Tories won 43.6% of the vote. Now, if we follow the UK's government logic on Indie Ref 2, then this Tory government most certainly does not have a mandate for its version of Brexit either. And therein is crystallised the unsustainability of the Tory government's position, to which even, and this might be a surprise to some of the members opposite, the government's position is so unsustainable that even some frontbench Tory MPs are admitting it secretly off the record. For the government to continue to hold on to the unsustainable position that Scotland should be denied its claim of right to exercise its democratic will to determine its own future, this will and can only deepen the current constitutional crisis. There is no doubt that England and Scotland's elected representatives have quite different and diverging constitutional mandates, but be in no doubt, each mandate is as valid as the other. Now let me turn to the tired and frankly insulting mantra trotted out too often by the benches opposite. The people of Scotland voted no to independence in 2014. They did, there's no denying that. And it seems, according to the beleaguered and very absent Secretary of State for Scotland, it appears It matters not how the people of Scotland voted in the past 5 elections or how they may vote in future elections. The Secretary of State has apparently decided that independence for Scotland can only be put to the people of Scotland once in a generation, regardless of any democratic choice they may choose to make. Summarised as, you'll have had your democracy then. This is quite frankly absurd and silly talk and insulting to the people of Scotland. What the Secretary of State for Scotland has revealed is either he knows nothing of or does not subscribe to the claim of right for Scotland, or he has clearly not read the Smith Commission, which is odd for a Secretary of State for Scotland, and I wish I could say I'm surprised about that. I hope the Minister standing in tonight for the beleaguered Secretary of State for Scotland, I hope he does not, when he gets to his feet, insult the House or the intelligence of the people of Scotland by saying this once-in-a-generation nonsense. I would draw the Minister's attention, and he really ought to listen to this because it's really important. I would draw the Minister's attention to the final report from the Smith Commission, more specifically, Chapter 2, Section 18, which clearly states, and I quote, "It is agreed that nothing in this report prevents Scotland becoming an independent country in the future, should the people of Scotland so choose." That seems pretty clear to me, and the former Secretary of State for Scotland, no wonder he's blushing. This unanimous verdict of the Smith Commission was an implicit agreement that a second referendum vote was and is constitutionally valid. It is inconceivable, Mr Speaker, inconceivable that this would have been included in the final published report if the members of the Smith Commission, a bare 2 months after the first vote, thought the matter had been kicked into the long grass for a generation. Because democracy is not an event. It is a growing, living, evolving, organic thing, and an expiration date cannot be put on it by this or any other government. And let's not forget, the appetite for a second independence referendum is easy to understand. The people of Scotland voted no to independence in 2014 because they were fed lies, mistruths and fear. They were told that in order to remain in the EU they'd need to vote no. They were told that if they voted yes they'd lose their pensions. And I don't have time to go through all the broken promises and the lies. But this time, when the independence referendum comes, and come it will, Scotland will make a different choice. Because the people of Scotland will see through the snake oil salesmen and the spivs who perpetrated these lies last time round. The people of Scotland will say to people in the opposite benches, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? I urge the Minister to remember the words of a former Tory Prime Minister, John Major. No nation can be held in a union against its will. The myth of the union of equals has been hopelessly exposed, and the people of Scotland realise that Scotland's future must be as an independent nation. And I urge this government to do the right thing and respect democracy. Every day of denial only feeds the fire of independence, and for a referendum on this issue, the momentum for which cannot be stayed. Now, I understand that the benches opposite, when they're full and even when they're empty, I understand that this government fears an independent Scotland, building a more fair, more equal, more compassionate, more outward-looking country on their doorstep. But that's really a matter for them. No Westminster government has the right to choose Scotland's path, and how dare it even try? And I will just end, Mr Speaker, by saying this government must prepare itself. Prepare yourselves for what is coming, because your arrogance, the arrogance of this government, its intransigence, its contempt for democracy, mean it shows that the UK is fatally disunited and is about to lose Scotland. A sovereign people will not be silenced. We will not go quietly. The clock is ticking and this union's time is up, and well this government knows it.
Minister Douglas-Ross.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And it's always a pleasure to come to this dispatch box to debate issues of importance to Scotland, and it's a huge privilege for me to do so. But I have to say, while I acknowledge the Honourable Lady's efforts to secure this debate tonight, a debate about the claim of right for Scotland did not come up much during the recent general election campaign that I fought in Murray. It wasn't the first issue out of people's lips when they were seeking to elect their representatives to this place. They didn't say that they wanted to have a debate and a discussion on constitutional matters yet again by the SNP. I will allow the gentleman in a moment. What they were really interested in during the most recent election campaign in Murray, when I spoke to them on doorsteps, in hustings, at street stalls, they were interested in the fact that the Scottish economy is growing slower than the UK economy. They were interested in the fact that Scotland's National Health Service has been underfunded and understaffed by the SNP Scottish Government, an SNP Scottish Government that from 2012 to 2013, between 2012 and 2013 and 2017 and 18, increased spending in the NHS by 13.1%, compared to increased spending in England by the UK Conservative Government by 17%. That shows the difference being made in Scotland when the SNP do not prioritise services that local people rely on. And just a final one I wanted to mention at this stage, because I know, Mr Speaker, the SNP have been very clear just recently about how Parliament should respect all members. And indeed, one of their MSPs said over the weekend that heckling and shouting was a form of discrimination. And I hope the SNP benches consider those words when they are trying to shout down a minister who is trying to respond to this debate. I'll quickly give way to my honourable friend and then I'll come back.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way during his excellent response to the SNP speech. But I wonder if the Minister is aware of a quite shocking tweet from Paul Wheelhouse, the SNP Scottish Government Minister, over the weekend in response to a tweet that I put up about a burn supper, questioning my Scottishness because I don't share his nationalist agenda. Does he agree with me? Does the Minister agree with me? This type of bullying and intimidation we see all too often from the benches opposite is not acceptable in this society. And secondly, it's perfectly possible to be a proud Scot and also a very proud Brit.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I have to say the mask is slipping from the SNP at the moment. They don't like it when their comments and their tweets are thrown back at them, but it was rather disgraceful, discourteous and I believe unbefitting of a Scottish Government SNP minister to tweet that a Scottish MP, someone who is as proud a Scot and as proud a Brit as I am, is any less Scottish because he doesn't support their plans for separation and the SNP's plans for independence. I will give way to the honourable gentleman because he tried to come in first.
Friend the Minister for giving way on that point, and he knows that he and I got on fairly well. But I wanted to come back not to this idea of a kind of backfighting between the SNP and the Conservatives, but to his point about the claim of right for Scotland, which he said was not contentious during the course of his election in Murray, which of course his vote fell quite significantly. But on that issue of the claim of right, he of course was not one of the members in this House. In fact, if I recall correctly, I took part in that debate that night and no member opposed that. So if it was not a contentious issue then, why is it a contentious issue tonight for the Minister?
I'm grateful, Mr Speaker. I think if the honourable gentleman reads the official report of this debate, I didn't say it wasn't contentious. I said it wasn't the pertinent issue. No. Well, perhaps across Scotland, but certainly Murray, it wasn't the top issue that people were campaigning on and urging their politicians to raise if they were elected to this place. I think it's only right that we look at the key issues that people were looking for in the general election, and I think the honourable gentleman would perhaps agree that even in his own seat in Glasgow, the claim of right was not the issue that people were queuing up to discuss. I'll give way to the honourable lady who secured the debate.
For giving me, can I just say to the Minister that if Scotland's right to choose is not something that people were exercised about when you were going out campaigning, why were all the Tory party leaflets in Scotland about vote Tory to stop Indian F2? And can I also ask him, he spent a lot of time tonight, for reasons that I'm not quite clear about, because the debate is about the claim of right for Scotland, he spent a lot of time talking about devolved issues. Can I say to the three members of the Tory party opposite that if you wanted to discuss devolved issues, maybe you should have stayed in the Scottish Parliament?
Well, I'm sorry that the honourable lady thinks that the healthcare in Scotland is not important enough for her. I'm sorry that the honourable lady thinks believes the education system in Scotland is not important enough for her. But we are elected as representatives of our constituencies, and Scotland is blessed to have two governments. And when one government is failing and letting it down, I think that it is incumbent of all politicians to raise issues that affect our constituents day in, day out. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman who's been trying to get in.
Mr. Speaker, I think I'm right in saying I am the only member of this place today whose name is actually on the claim of right. That's something I'm very, very proud of indeed. The claim of right to which I put my name was about the Scots having control over their own destiny and over their own services, if you like. Surely, therefore, the standard of service delivery we see is what the Scottish Government will be judged against. Right now, we know it all, all of us, all of you in the Scottish National Party know this, that on the health front, the Scottish Government is failing. We know on transport it's failing. Yes, oh yes, we do. And on that, the Scottish Government will be judged. And if indeed Ref 2 ever comes to it, they will be judged according. And I think, I say to the Scottish National Party, be careful what you wish for.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for that intervention, and it's quite telling, sitting on the front bench here, to look at the faces of the leader of the Scottish National Party, who has been very considered in his reactions during this debate, compared to some of the reactions of other members of the SNP. Because something that the right honourable gentleman for Roscommon-Lochaber is very accustomed to saying in this place is that the people of Scotland are watching. And I think if people back in Scotland are watching tonight, they are seeing an SNP parliamentary group who are obsessed with the Constitution, who simply want to speak about separation, that don't want to discuss the relevant issues for constituencies across Scotland. I have given way, but I'm sorry if SNP members continue to shout me down, but I listened to the debate. I listened to the debate from the Honourable Lady. I believe with consideration, and I've taken on board a number of her points. And if I may come on to the points made by the Honourable Lady, well, she's shouting across, what about the leaflets? And that was one of the things I wanted to pick up on, because on leaflets, independence and separation never featured on a single SNP leaflet. They didn't want to tell people that the election was about that. And interestingly, from a number of SNP MPs who were returned here, and I'm looking particularly at the Honourable Gentleman for Angus because his letter was put out in the public domain, were actually writing to Labour supporters to say, vote for me this time. You may be a traditional Labour supporter, a strong unionist, but vote for me on this occasion, not to support separation and independence, but just to stop the Tories getting in. And I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman because he wrote that letter to Labour supporters.
I thank the Minister for giving way, particularly as he brings me into this debate. Yes, indeed, we did write to non-SNP supporting members of the Angus electorate, and we did that elsewhere, I'm sure, in Scotland, and that was to invite them to, notwithstanding their views on the Constitution, to take a view on a more progressive way forward for the country of Scotland. And that's exactly the view that they took, and I'm pleased that we did that.
Absolutely.
Now, my honourable friend, who secured the debate, said very clearly in her excellent speech that not everybody in Scotland is persuaded of the case for independence, and there is not a single SNP MP on these benches who is not on that page. However, we will not be swayed from our priority to make sure that the case for independence is aired as clearly and as manifestly as possible. And will the Minister tell me, Mr Speaker, will he tell me the case that my honourable friend made, which was that devolution is not an event, it is a process? What will the Minister and his government do when they run out of concessions to make because it's independence?
I'm grateful, Mr Speaker, that the Honourable Gentleman for Angus has confirmed in the House of Commons, it will be on the official record, that the SNP garnered votes at this most recent election on the pretence that it was nothing about independence, it wasn't supporting independence, and then yet less than a month later we're here discussing constitutional issues because it's all the SNP can bring forward. I do want to pick up on a number of the points that the Honourable Lady made during her speech. She spoke about the absent Secretary of State for Scotland. I'm just scanning around and I can't see the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland anywhere in the chamber either. The Honourable Lady said the people of Scotland have made their choice. And I agree the people of Scotland have made their choice in the same way the Right Honourable Gentleman for Ross-Scanlon-Caber said at Prime Minister's questions last week. The people of Scotland said no. The people of Scotland said no in 2014. The Honourable Lady said, but that 2014 referendum on independence was won on the back of lies and mistruths. She said it was won on the back of lies and mistruths. I wonder if those lies and mistruths she's speaking about were the white paper which the SNP put forward. The white paper that promised us oil at $100 a barrel. The oil was going to pay for absolutely everything in Scotland. Well, we're really getting animated now, but if I can just try to finish my remarks. $100 a barrel, we were told, the Scottish economy would be based on. We were also told that it was a once-in-a-generation event. That is not rhetorical flourish, as some of the SNP would now like to say. That is written in black and white in the white paper that they put forward for independence. That was their model for separation, and therefore, well, the Honourable Gentleman is shouting from a sedentary position. What page? I can do better than that, Mr Speaker. It was in the 6th paragraph of their document to take Scotland out of the United Kingdom. They said very clearly it was a once-in-a-generation event. The Honourable Lady also, in her speech, was mentioning how successive election results have proved that the SNP have the support across the country. And she, reeled off a number of elections where the SNP have been successful. Well, the Honourable Gentleman for Airdrie and Shotts is saying every single one. Not recent council by-elections, because the final council by-election, of the decade in Scotland was held in my Murray seat, and I'm delighted that the Keith and Cullen ward returned a Conservative councillor. And only last week, Mr Speaker, only last week, the first council by-election of the decade elected a Scottish Conservative. And do you know the percentage of vote to the Scottish Conservatives in that recent by-election? 62%. A Scottish Conservative councillor elected with 62% of the vote. So it's no surprise at all that the Honourable Lady refused to even comment on those successes of the Scottish Conservative Party. This, well, big picture, I think that's a big picture to win 62% of the vote. As I said at the beginning of my remarks, Mr Speaker, I think there are many things we should be focusing on in this Parliament and indeed at Holyrood that the public in all our constituencies can relate to and can be assured that their politicians are dealing with. We should be focusing on these issues, such as the fact that the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People remains unopened by the SNP because they have failed in their hospital building. We shouldn't be dismissing the concerns of the state of our Scottish police stations, which have been shown to be flooding and roofs coming in. These are the issues that the people of Scotland expect our politicians to be dealing with, not constitutional wrangling, which we always get from the SNP, and I think they should focus on that, Mr Speaker. Thank you.
Well said. The question is, this House to now adjourn. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.